Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Daniel Dankwitz. I'm the TaylorMade Tours Manager at Rockjumper Birding Tours, and I will be your host for this evening's Dream Destinations webinar. We're just going to give a few minutes for the participant list to grow. We have people joining quite quickly now. But just before I begin, I'd love to share with you our calendar for upcoming Dream Destination series. So this evening, we're going to be touching on Guatemala, a truly exciting Central American destination. But coming up on the 28th of May, we have David Hoddinott, who's going to be showcasing Cameroon in Central West Africa. Cameroon is a tremendously exciting destination. It's been closed off for tourism for several years due to a few safety concerns. Cameroon is now completely open. It is safe to visit again, and we have operated three tours within the last 2 years, yielding such incredible species as Inkolengu rail, grey-necked rockfowl, as well as a handful of Sahelian species. So a really, really wonderful destination, and we invite you to join us on the 28th of May. On the 25th of June, then, apologies, the 18th of June, I will be showcasing Kruger National Park here in South Africa. Kruger National Park is one of our largest protected wilderness areas. The extent of Kruger exceeds several European countries in its size. So, a massive, massive wilderness area. And early next year, we're going to be teaming up with BirdLife South Africa, which is our largest bird conservation organization here in South Africa. And we are running a birding race within Kruger named the Kruger Challenge. Details will be released very soon about the challenge. And this is a non-profit event that's being organized in support of the white-winged flufftail conservation, which is one of Africa's rarest bird species. And then finally, on the 30th of June, sorry, 30th of July, we have our managing director, Keith Valentine, who's going to be showcasing Rockjumper's sister company, Birding Direct. So thank you all for joining us today for what promises to be a magical virtual journey through one of Central America's most rewarding birding destinations, Guatemala. This incredible country is a true feast for the senses. Imagine highland landscapes blanketed in mist, lush cloud forests that are absolutely teeming with bird life, and towering volcanoes rising dramatically across the skyline, as you can see in Lev's wonderful cover photo here. It's in these breathtaking settings that we look for some of the region's most sought after bird species. And we're talking about highlights like the prized Horned Guan, the gorgeous Pink-headed Warbler, which is certainly one of my personal top most wanted birds, the spectacular Resplendent Quetzal, Goldman's Warbler, Mountain Tanager, and the Blue-throated Motmot, to just name a few. Guatemala truly delivers a birding experience that's as rich in diversity as the country is rich in its natural beauty. And to help bring this destination to life, we're thrilled to be joined this evening by one of our most passionate and knowledgeable tour leaders, Lev.
Hello.
Lev's to the natural world began in his childhood, exploring the forests near his family home along the Finnish border with Russia. Lev is now based in Huntsville, Canada, and he spent nearly a decade as a park ranger in Ontario's legendary Algonquin Park. I hope I pronounced that right, Lev. Educating thousands of visitors, contributing to ecological research, and developing a deep understanding of North American wildlife. But Lev's curiosity hasn't stopped there. His love for the outdoors has taken him from seabird surveys off the North Carolina coast to birding lodges throughout Central and South America. He's led ecological expeditions, contributed to conservation efforts, and most importantly, shares a strong and deep enthusiasm for sharing his love for birds with guests all around the world. Lev is truly at home in the field, and especially so in the American tropics, where he continues to lead birding tours. So buckle up and get ready for an enchanting the enchanting landscapes and remarkable bird life of Guatemala. We'll also have some time for questions at the end, so please feel free to pop your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll be more than happy to answer these live for you at the end of today's webinar. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming your guide for this evening's virtual tour of Guatemala. Over to you, Lev.
Oh, thank you very much, Dan. And thank you, everybody, for attending this lovely webinar. It certainly feels great to be back on the webinar roster here, and especially for this time as I get to talk about Guatemala, one of my favorite destinations. I have had the pleasure of being able to explore Guatemala several times. I've spent lots of time in Mexico, which borders Guatemala, and certainly it was kind of a natural extension for me to extend my travels out to there. And it is a fantastic country, not just for birding, but for cultural history, for food, for a wide variety of different reasons, many of which I will talk to you about today. So for the longest time, Guatemala was sort of a second-rate, perhaps, birding destination in a lot of people's minds. There were maybe some security concerns and things like that, but it's been slowly growing, and people have slowly been finding out that it is a top destination for birding in Central America, and of course in the entire world. There's a variety of different things that you have a much easier time seeing in Guatemala than you do in other places. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I'll give you a little bit of a virtual birding tour of the country that kind of mirrors a couple of our itineraries and show you some of the birds and other highlights of this fantastic country. So we'll get right into the meat and potatoes of the talk here. Here's a map of Guatemala. It is a country that is located in the north of Central America. Okay, so it is bordered by Mexico to the north and west, Belize to the east, and to the southeast, both Honduras and El Salvador. So it's kind of a strangely shaped country. There's sort of these two blocks, as you can see on this map here. Here's a map that birders might find a little bit more interesting. It's a topographical map. So you can see that bottom part of Guatemala has this grand ridge of Sierra. It's the Central American Cordillera that runs through it. Big plateau there in the northwest that I'll talk about a little bit later. Certainly a band of volcanoes in the far south. You could see those little points there along the Pacific slope. And then there's this whole huge lowland portion in the north of the country that's part of this Yucatan Peninsular lowlands. Okay, and we'll be exploring virtually these zones here in Guatemala in the next few minutes. So always love to make a shout out to Antigua Guatemala, the old Guatemala city. New Guatemala City is just like any large Central American city, certainly some cultural highlights in there, but for the most part, it's kind of a commercial zone. Whereas Antigua Guatemala, the old Guatemala city, is this beautiful colonial city. Lots of museums, if you love museums, lots of old buildings. Great place to look for jade, if you like jade, at reasonable prices. So I always sort of recommend arriving a day or even 2 days before a tour. And our comprehensive Guatemala tour starts in Antigua, Guatemala. So always good to give yourself a couple of days, or at least a day, to explore the old city, because it is a fantastic spot to explore. Lots of, and very safe, the tourist parts of it during the day. And yeah, certainly a cultural highlight for sure. Guatemala itself, it's the most populated country in all of Central America. And I think it's the fourth in all of North America. There's 18 million people that live in Guatemala, which sounds like a lot, especially because it's kind of like a little country. But as in most Central and South American countries, most of the people that live there live in just a few little areas, valleys mostly. So while it is kind of high density urban in the places where it is high density urban, but you're never running into gigantic crowds of people when you're birding in Guatemala, for sure. Here's a spectacular view. This is actually in a hotel that we stay at when we start our comprehensive Guatemala tour. Okay, as you can see there's a volcano. There's actually 3 volcanoes that are visible from this particular patio. This is the Volcán de Agua, the volcano of water, which is not active at the moment. But if we were to pan a little bit to the right, actually that first cover image that you guys may have seen with the smoky volcano, that's Volcán de Fuego. And aptly named, it is still erupting, and it's especially at night. You can see the red lava flow from the city, even from the balcony of the hotel, which is pretty spectacular. So it's a great start to the trip, starting here in the old city, and you even have an evening to explore should you wish. So Guatemala, this is just a little teaser of what's going to happen later on in the presentation, but there's not really an endemic bird species to Guatemala in particular. Okay, so when we think of an endemic bird, what does endemic mean? A bird that is only found in a particular spot, a particular country, island, what have you. So while Guatemala doesn't really have an endemic bird, there are a variety of what are called regional endemics. And of course, birds don't really care about arbitrary lines on a map. So it's this Chiapas Cordillera, especially in the southwest of Guatemala, that it shares with Chiapas, which is a state in southeastern Mexico. There are a lot of birds there that are endemic to that zone, some of which are easier to see in Guatemala than they are in Chiapas. And there's also the Yucatan Peninsular lowlands, which have a lot of species that are endemic to that zone, that Yucatan Peninsula and the lowlands associated with it. So you can pick up a lot of regional endemics, over 40 species in Guatemala. So these are some of them, okay? I'll talk more about them later on in the tour, but we've got the ocellated turkey in the upper left, the Yucatan Peninsula endemic, of course, the Horned Guan, which everyone loves, on the upper right, the Pink-headed Warbler, dead center, the Goldman's Warbler, which is a very special bird that I'll talk about later on the bottom left, and the Quetzal, the Resplendent Quetzal, of course, always a crowd favorite and excellent to see in Guatemala. So on our little virtual birding adventure, we're going to visit these three main zones. So the Yucatan Peninsula lowlands, that northern part, hot and steamy. The western highlands, which is sort of that Cordillera in the central western part of the country. The Sierra de Cuchumatanes, which is a part of that. It's a big plateau. And the volcanic belt, the belt of volcanoes at the bottom, the Pacific slope, where we do a lot of birding on our tours there. So it is worthy to mention at this point that we have two sort of main Guatemala tours, and they are quite different from one another. So not all of the destinations that I'm going to be talking about on this talk are going to exist in one tour sort of in and of itself. So we've got this 16-day ultimate tour, which encompasses three countries, Belize, Guatemala, and Honduras. And that tour, for example, does visit this next area that I'm going to be talking about, Tikal and that northern lowland. Whereas the other tour, the comprehensive or the specialties tour, which is 13 days long, only stays in Guatemala, but we do not, on this tour in and of itself, visit that lowland part, that Tikal zone. But there is an extension that you can link it to. So just worthy of noting for anybody thinking about taking one of these tours. So let's get back in there. There it is, the northern Yucatan Peninsular lowlands of Guatemala. So the highlight here, and something definitely not to be missed when visiting this part of the world, is of course Tikal. Tikal is a over 2,000-year-old Mayan city. It's got several temples. It's one of the best preserved Mayan cities in the entire world. And it is a tourist site. There are many people that come every day to have a look at the temples and all the other cool stuff that you can see there. But it is still located within some fantastic primary forest, which is excellent for birding. This perhaps is one of the main attractions at Tikal. This is temple number 5, the second highest temple, but perhaps the most spectacular just because it's in this very open, beautiful setting. Not only is this the main attraction for people just doing regular tourism, but also for birders, because Temple 5 almost always hosts a pair of these orange-breasted falcons. The orange-breasted falcon is a beautiful bird. It's like a bat falcon the size of a peregrine. Very spectacular, very large. And this is a bird that's not necessarily endemic, or it has a very wide range actually throughout South America and into some parts of North America, but it is nowhere common. So you can see it in Brazil, you can see it in Guyana, you can see it in a variety of different places, but usually when you find it, it's kind of a random occurrence. Whereas here in Tikal, they are almost guaranteed. They're almost always nesting on the temple, and you can get pretty good looks at them. Often they're catching collared doves and white-winged doves during the nesting season, so you can actually see like a food delivery, and it's pretty cool. Certainly a highlight of a visit to Tikal, and probably one of the most reliable places to see this bird in the world. Here's another Tikal specialty bird, the ocellated turkey, one of only two species of wild extant turkeys in the world. And it is a spectacular bird. Every color of the rainbow that you can imagine is on this bird somewhere. It's got these weird orange tubercles on its face that it can inflate when it's displaying. Very, very cool bird. Again, not necessarily endemic, but it is endemic to that Yucatan Peninsular lowland. In many areas, especially in Mexico, they can be fairly shy and difficult to see. But Mayan temple sites, Tikal being a prime example, they're often very, very tame just because they're used to seeing hundreds of people every single day. So you can get fantastic views, beautiful photos, and a great experience with this iconic bird. Here's another bird that's got a widespread range, but is easier to see in Tikal than most other places, the pheasant cuckoo. Okay, around the airstrip there in Tikal, for some reason, there's always one or two hanging around, and it's a bird that we often get on our tours to Tikal. Of course, there's always this sort of crowd pleasers that are common in many places in Central America, but always a treat to see. Keelbilled toucan is quite common there. Sometimes you run across a little ant swarm, usually not those huge Aceiton ants that you see in South America, but different species of ants that attract a handful of birds. Excellent for like a first time ant swarm experience. Often lots of wood creepers attending. This is a less common species, ruddy wood creeper. But again, if you come across one of these, really easy to see the birds, really close, and kind of a neat experience for sure. And of course, a big primary healthy forest means king vultures, and it's an excellent place. Especially, I don't know if they let you climb the temples anymore. I think they might not. But regardless, you can still get an excellent view of one of these soaring if your stars align at Tikal. And another place that is visited on our 3-country tour, Belize, Guatemala, and Honduras, or on the extension of the main tour, is the Montagua Valley. So it's a dry valley. It's kind of in between the lowlands and the western highlands, and it offers yet some more opportunities to see birds that are not common elsewhere in Guatemala. One of them is the russet-crowned Motmot, one of the world's northerly Motmots, and usually not very shy, easy to see here in the Montagua Valley, probably the highlight of the valley. And this species as well, very common. Lesser ground cuckoo doesn't really have the difficulty or the mystique, perhaps, of the neomorphous or some of the Asian ground cuckoos, but still a fantastic bird with that blue eyeliner, and can be pretty easy to see in some situations in the Montagua Valley. And of course, the cute little lesser roadrunner, another crowd favorite. Everyone loves a roadrunner. All right, we'll move over. We're going to go south and west into that big plateau that's encircled by the red circle there on your screen, the Sierra de Cuchumatanes. And this is probably one of my favorite places in Guatemala. This is a brand new area that we've only been starting to visit in the past few years. And it is a spectacular zone. Okay, it's this high plateau. This is sort of a sunset shot from that area. It's basically this mosaic of low lying sort of valleys that are populated. And the people that are living here are all Mayan. Okay, so unlike the textbooks will lead you to believe, the Maya are certainly not extinct. They're living in their full splendor here in the Cuchumatanes and in other areas there. This is very organic, right? So you can see people living and doing what they've been doing for thousands of years, practicing agriculture, still practicing the religion, still speaking the language. So in Tikal, yes, obviously you see the temple. It's a little bit more gentrified over there just because it's a tourist site, whereas the Cuchus are a really organic, very interesting experience. And it is a very cool place for birding as well. This is another sort of view from up on a hill. This is very sparsely populated sort of area, and some very unique birds that you cannot find in other places in Central America. And look at this, like it doesn't even look like Central America, right? It looks like maybe Colorado or New Mexico or somewhere, these large rocky outcrops with pine trees, and yeah, very unique ecosystem. And unlike the steamy lowlands that I just showed you, this place is cold. And during the time that we visit, which is usually in the winter, it frequently gets below freezing at night. Okay. So Esteban, who's our our local guide that we use over there. He's an excellent guy. He's a good friend of mine, excellent photographer. And he took this photo, which is one of my favorite photos, I think, of this Goldman's warbler, a very special warbler, on an icy, sort of frosty bit of vegetation, which, like, you see this photo in Guatemala, really doesn't come to your mind immediately. But yeah, that's the Cuchumatanes for you. And this bird is certainly one of the gems, I think, of Guatemala, because again, it's not endemic, but it is really the only place where you can see this bird, because there's maybe a still extant population in Chiapas in Mexico, but it's if it is extant, it's inaccessible. So here's your only chance. And I really love this bird. In August, I went with some Guatemalan friends to photograph it in the Cuchumatanes. And if you like photography, this place is nuts for backdrops, right? Because there's all these flowers, mustard on the right-hand side. So it has this yellow background, some small purple flowers. And a lot of the birds are using these red hot poker. So this was not a native species of plant. It was introduced by the Spaniards, but it's been there for many, many, many years. And the birds have adapted to it and use it for nectar. It has an excellent nectar source there for them. So the photography can be quite spectacular over there. One of my favorite places for sure for photography. And of course, this is another bird that everybody loves, and for a very good reason, the pink-headed warbler. Okay, this is another one that's not endemic, but it shares this species, Guatemala, with Chiapas, which is a neighboring Mexican state. They're not the easiest birds to see in Chiapas. There are some places where you can see them, but here, especially in the Cuchumatanes, they are abundant. You can hear them chipping everywhere. This is a bird that we do not miss. If we don't see it in the Cuchus, which is very unlikely, we have several other chances in other places in the trip. But here they are absolutely abundant and often very friendly, quite curious, and often give very good looks. So two less colorful, but not less exciting birds. Two different siskins that are very special in this part of the world. This Chiapas pine siskin on your left, which is probably or hopefully going to be split in the near future. Doesn't really look like northern North American pine siskin. No streaking, dark cap, dark bill. Sounds almost the same though, so who knows? And on the right there, this was an almost legendary bird for a long time, black-capped siskin. So black-capped siskins, for the longest time, were sort of almost mythical. They would appear. There weren't really any good photos of them. You'd have to get lucky to see one on a birding tour. Now that we found out about the cuchus, very easy to see. It's become quite not very much of a challenging bird to see now. And sometimes you can get really good looks at it like this. But again, another special bird that really, this is the only place to reliably see it on a tour. Lots of potential splits as well. This is the Guatemalan yellow-eyed junco, kind of a less contrasty version of its northern cousins. This is a recent split that's been accepted by all of the authorities, I believe. Guatemalan flicker. This was just in the past supplement, I believe. A very beautiful flicker with that cinnamon-colored hood. And this, again, is probably, for me, one of the most beautiful hummingbirds, if not the most beautiful hummingbird in North America. This is the garnet-throated hummingbird. It's a big hummingbird, like a mountain gem size. And again, not endemic to Guatemala. You can see it in Honduras. You can see it in Mexico, in a variety of other places. But this, perhaps, is one of the best places to see it at eye level, because they use that red-hot poker to feed on. Usually it's a canopy-dwelling species. But depending on the time of year, you can come here and see lots of them, and very close, like you can see in these photos. And I was very happy to get these last summer. That's actually the reason why I went to Guatemala, and it worked out. This is one that'll probably surprise some folks that might be familiar with it, a maroon-chested ground dove. So for the longest time, this very secretive, very rare ground dove was thought to be a bamboo specialist, right? Something that follows seeding bamboo, which only happens every, 50, 60 years or so in its range. And so very difficult to track down, never guaranteed, always the highlight of a trip when seen. But Esteban actually discovered a population of these in the Cuchumatanes at 2,200 meters above sea level in an open pine forest with no bamboo in sight. Why they're there? Nobody knows, but they're successfully nesting there. He's documented a bunch of nests. And this is a bird that we stand a very reasonable chance of seeing on our comprehensive Guatemala tour. I've seen it on, knock on wood, all the tours that I've done to that part of the world, and it's all like a really spectacular highlight. It's not something that you expect to see, but yeah, very surprising its presence here. So you never know. Guatemala is the land of surprises. And of course, if you like night birds, the cuckoos are an excellent spot to try an unspotted saw-whet owl. And like all owls in this genus, can be very tricky to see, not sometimes very responsive to tape, but we have had very good luck with it, and it is very abundant in the Cuchumatanes, where it lives in a more open type pine forest, much easier to see than in dense, oaky, sort of jungly type forest where you look for it, for example, in Costa Rica. Okay, so moving down the line, we're going to go to another part of the Western Highlands, that transvolcanic belt at the Pacific slope, that bottom of the country there, which offers another suite of fantastic birds. The forest here is a little bit different from what we've looked at so far. It's sort of this pine, oak, semi-deciduous forest with lots of leaves. Birding is a little bit tougher, but the diversity is quite a bit higher. And this, of course, is the home of the Horned Guan. Guatemala's probably diamond on the crown of the country. So the Horned Guan, for the longest time, used to be one of these legendary birds that always required a little bit of hardship to try and see. So you might have seen it in El Yunque, not in El Yunque, in the park in Mexico, in Chiapas, El Triunfo. You might have seen it in El Triunfo, which requires a long hike and possibly camping to see it. You may have seen it in Tarrales in Guatemala, where it's, again, like a 6 to 8 hour hike. So it's always been one of these birds that you had to suffer for. But with these new spots, especially in Tacana, which is a volcano, you also see it in the same volcano on the Mexican side, but you have to climb on the Mexican side. And in Guatemala, you can just drive right up to it. We saw this bird about 5 minutes out of the vehicle, which for Horned Guan is quite incredible, to be honest. And we've had lots of luck with this bird in these new sites without having to beat yourself up. Maybe walking for half an hour, up to an hour or 2 hours. And this is sort of a typical view that you see on your screen. This was my life review on Tacana. It was an incredible experience having them at eye level, and just foraging and calling. They make this really weird, like, vibrating sound type call, which has not really formally been described. It's like it sounds like a cell phone vibrating. It's a really strange call for a bird. And I'll just another picture just for the heck of it. This was a bird that we saw on a tour. This was my last tour to Guatemala a couple of years ago, and it was roosting right beside the trail, and it was filling up the scope. Like, the entire scope was just this face with this bizarre fleshy horn that we still don't know why they have it or how they use it. So yeah, definitely, if there's one reason to go to Guatemala, there's so many, but if you just had to pick one, this would definitely be it, the Horned Guan. And a bird with a similar distribution to the Horned Guan, which is just a couple of volcanoes in that sort of Chiapas Cordillera, the azure-rumped tanager, also called Cabanis's tanager, which I knew it as initially. So this picture, not a fantastic picture, but sort of shows you the gist of the bird. It's a beautiful bird. It's got a greenish back, blue front. But as of a couple of weeks ago, so very, very recently, this has been actually coming to a feeder. So now, not only can you get like beautiful views of it at eye level, but you can actually get some fantastic photos as well, which I've not yet to do, but that's probably going to be my next Guatemala adventure. Get photos of the azure rump tanager. And of course, the Quetzal has to be the third after the Horned Guan and the azure rump tanager. But the Quetzal is a bird that many birders are familiar with for good reason. It's probably one of the most striking birds in the Americas. It's got those 4 very long upper tail coverts. But there are other places where you can see the Quetzal. Panama, the Chiriquí region, for example. Costa Rica, which is where I think most people have probably seen the resplendent Quetzal. So Guatemala has a healthy population as well. They're not difficult to see. But this is something that might interest some folks in terms of Guatemala versus other destinations for viewing the Quetzal. So on the left-hand side of your screen, you see that beautifully illuminated Quetzal is a male, and that is a picture I took in Costa Rica. Okay, it's a typical male. You can see those four really long upper tail coverts there, but compare it to the bird on the right-hand side of your screen, which is a Quetzal from Guatemala. And you'll notice that the upper tail coverts look a little bit longer. And that is true. So the subspecies, the nominate subspecies, which is in Guatemala, Honduras, and Mexico, and El Salvador, maybe sometimes, maybe historically, the upper tail coverts are actually longer, up to 30% longer than the other subspecies, which occurs in Costa Rica and Panama. So if you really want to see a Quetzal with a really long tail or long upper tail coverts, Guatemala is the spot. Of course, not the only Trogon to be haunting the oaky pine woods there. This is another one with a rather restricted range, mountain Trogon. It's all over Mexico, but it just barely creeps into northern Central America. Another very beautiful bird. If you like jays, there's a bunch of difficult but spectacular jays found in this part of the country as well. This is one of them, the azure hooded jay. Okay, very well named with a beautiful bluish cap. Almost looks like it's glowing in the understory. And unicolored jay, another species, another one that might be split off into a couple of populations that are genetically distinct, but look very similar. And another jay that I don't have a picture of here is black-throated jay. So, and all three species are sort of northern Central American, South Mexican endemic, depending on which is which. And again, northern emerald toucanet, a bird that's widespread, but always nice to see a toucanet, especially in a strange context like in a pine oak forest. But here they are. Blue-throated Motmot, again, another sort of South Mexican, northern Central American endemic, and often a challenge because we see it during the time that it's not really vocal. But usually when you can track one down, it gives great views because they just sit there. They're Motmots, usually very calm around observers once found. Hummingbirds. Again, no shortage of hummingbirds in this part of the world. This is probably one of the most sought after, the wine-throated hummingbird, named for the color of its throat. Can be very easy to see in Guatemala. Also occurs in Honduras as well. Sorry, in Chiapas as well. This is another semi-endemic rufous saberwing. Like any saberwing, very large and in charge, and quite spectacular with that cinnamon-colored throat and belly. Another great bird, somewhat endemic to this part of the world, not a very huge distribution there. Lots in Mexico, but just barely creeping into northern Central America. The chestnut-sided shrike vireo. Looks almost like a chestnut-sided warbler that's kind of been pulled over a vireo, but often a canopy dweller, so it can be hard to see. But sometimes when we have a fruiting tree that's sort of at eye level or lower down, these guys can come down and you might get a view like this. It's quite a showstopper. And owls, nice selection of owls. This is one of them, fulvous owl. Again, kind of a southern Mexico, northern Central America endemic. Very big. Often we see it during the day. If we don't, we can look for it at night, but it's almost looks like a barred or a spotted owl. Functions the same way as well and sounds very similar to those two species. And if you're very, very lucky, you may get a glimpse of this owl. This was a treat that we had on one of our tours, a Stygian owl. A classic example of a bird that's very widespread. It's in the Caribbean, it's in North America, it's in South America, all the way down through Brazil. But nowhere is it very easy to see. So you really have to get lucky wherever you are. Maybe there's a stakeout like this one was, but again, be prepared for surprises. This is a site that we stay at on the lower end of the elevation in the volcanic belt. It's called Los Tarrales. It's a beautiful spot. Not only is the food really good, the lodge very comfortable, but also the grounds of the lodge are spectacular. And they get you into that sort of elevation where you can see yet another suite of different birds. So Central American favorites like turquoise-browed Motmot, very common on the grounds of Los Tarrales. You really don't have to go far from your room to see one of these guys. And even toady Motmot, which is the smallest and arguably the most difficult of the Motmots. Very small, very quiet usually, but can be seen with relative ease. at Tarrales, again, not very far from your room. So you have that luxury of staying in this beautiful place without having to take a long drive to get to the birding spot. Long-tailed manakin, the world's most northerly manakin. This one exists in a few different pockets in Guatemala, and Tarrales is one of them. We visit a lek of these birds on the tour. So if we're lucky, we get to see the males doing this somersaulting wild display, which you may have seen before on nature documentaries. Excuse me. Just getting past a cold. So yes, another great opportunity to view a classic Central American bird in Guatemala. And of course, surprises are always around the corner, like I've been saying throughout this presentation. On one of the tours, we had this beautiful view of ornate hawk eagle, perhaps one of the most beautiful raptors in all of the Americas. We had a pair that were circling at eye level, kind of went over us. One of them perched. Yeah, certainly a surprising bird and a beautiful sighting. And you just never know. Even something like this, a bird that you might not associate with Guatemala at all, or especially the Guatemalan highlands, spotted rail. There's a couple of places where there are high altitude lakes that we visit on the 3-country tour, the Belize, Honduras, Guatemala tour, where we have a chance of seeing this very secretive, very mysterious bird. Again, it's a bird that's widespread. It has a very broad range, but nowhere is it common and nowhere is it easy to see. But it can be a nice grab here on a Guatemala tour. So you just never know. I always like to say that. And Guatemala is one of these countries where the sort of renaissance of birding has occurred. There's a lot of local birders out there looking for new sites and constantly finding new stakeouts, and lots of birding tours going on there now. So it's really one of these hot destinations now. So talking about hot destinations, here's our little selection of tours that Rock Jumper offers to Guatemala. So I've talked a little bit about those two that you see right up in the top left, the 16-day ultimate tour, which encompasses 3 different countries. So you get to get more of that Yucatan Peninsular stuff in Belize, which is excellent, some excellent water birding there. And of course, Honduras, Pico Bonito, the famous lovely Caatinga zone. In Guatemala, you get to visit the Western Highlands, see the Quetzal, and you get to visit Tikal as well on that tour and see the orange-breasted falcon and the ruins. So fantastic. We have a specialties of Central America tour, just the Guatemala, just in and of itself, like I mentioned earlier, does not include Tikal, but otherwise a very comprehensive look at all the habitats that I've talked about, save for the Yucatan. But you can add an extension to that tour, as you can see in the bottom there, which will take you to those spots. We also have a relaxed itinerary, which is brand new. So this is an itinerary that's kind of slower paced than the regular itinerary. You're not getting up at 3:00 in the morning and driving 7 hours for to get to see some obscure thing. You're staying several days in each lodge, and it's designed to be sort of more of a relaxing tour, removing some of the less pleasant things of a long and hard birding tour. And we have a bird photography tour as well, which is also brand new, which is 12 days in Belize and Guatemala. So you get the best of both worlds there. And also, I'll always a shout out to TaylorMade there. Guatemala is more than just what I've talked about in this short little presentation, right? There's a lot of other cool opportunities for birding in the country. It's got an excellent pelagic out of Puerto Quetzal. And if you want to explore more of these sort of less on the beaten track areas, maybe spend more time with the Horned Guan, maybe try and photograph the Horned Guan or other species. Always a good idea for a tailor-made tour, a private tour. And the great part about that is if you can find a handful of friends to go with you, the price is competitive comparable to a stage departure, and you can go and do whatever you would like. So always good to mention that. And so I'm just going to wrap it up, I guess, a little bit here. So I hope you've enjoyed these past minutes of me babbling about Guatemala. I hope it's come across that I really love this country and the people and the birds that call it home. So whether you're here looking for a great view of a very long-tailed Quetzal, or you're looking for something special like a Horned Guan, Mayan ruins, or just a spectacular backdrop to the birding, Guatemala has all this to offer and more. So thank you for muchísimas gracias for listening to my webinar. I'd be happy to take any questions that anybody might have at this point.
Wonderful, Lev. Thank you so much for such an incredibly insightful presentation. And your photography, I have to say, is just absolutely out of this world. Some
Oh,
really,
thanks, Dan.
really top,
Thank you.
top-notch photographs of some incredibly difficult to see and difficult to photograph birds. And you did such a great job in showcasing just how incredibly diverse Guatemala is, from the incredible history and the temple sites that we visit through to rich, incredibly diverse lowland sites where it's going to be hot and steamy, all the way up to those really icy, higher altitude zones where, admittedly, diversity will be a lot less, but it's really a quality over quantity destination. So, absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for taking us on that virtual tour, sharing all of your prior experience with us, and especially for giving a shout out for tailor-made tours. As Lev
Yeah.
said, we are very passionate about taking you to the destinations that you would love to visit. And a common misconception about tailor-made tours is that they work out more expensive. But as Lev so correctly highlighted, if you come to us with a group, often we can get that pricing down. We can make it competitive against our scheduled departure tours. And it comes with the flexibility of being able to run these tours exactly when you would like to travel. You can travel with your preferred travel companions. You get to spend time, be it time for photography, following a more relaxed itinerary, whatever it might be. We are incredibly passionate about curating tours around your specific needs, and we'd love the opportunity to do so. We are also constantly working to diversify our tour portfolio. And as Lev mentioned, we have recently launched tours that are including tours to Guatemala following more relaxed itineraries. They tend to have fewer single night stays, typically focusing on the highlights of any particular destination. But we're also working to showcase some of these incredibly rich destinations for photography. I know Lev's just returned from Thailand, which is another one of the destinations that we have recently launched a bird photography tour to. Um, so we would absolutely love if some of you would choose to travel with us going forward. Lev, you did such a good job that we have only a handful of questions for you this evening, so you
Okay.
bring off lightly. The first one is, will there be time-consuming border crossings on the longer itinerary?
The answer is no. So it depends, of course, on what your interpretation of time consuming is. But usually the border crossing takes just a few minutes. So we're on a bus. So there's a couple of different ones. So the Belize and Guatemala one, we actually change vehicles. So all we have to do is go through the border as we would the US Canada border, for example. You walk through, you do your thing, they open up your bags maybe, and then you're off you go. There's usually not a huge queue, so it takes usually an hour or probably even less. Um, and then the Guatemala Honduras border is a very quick crossing. Again, you show them your passport, and then you're off. So, barring any holidays or anything like that that might change the amount of people that are crossing at the border, it's usually a fairly painless and quick crossing.
Wonderful. Thanks, Lev. The next question is from Jill, and I will quickly answer this one. Jill asks, is there any other wildlife that can be expected within the region? And Jill, the answer to your question is yes, there certainly is. It's not the most biodiverse region in the world in terms of its wildlife. There are other areas of Central and South America that are perhaps a little bit better. But Central and South America are incredibly rich birding destinations, as Lev so brilliantly shared with us. But a number of the other highlights that you could expect on the tour include a few species of howler and spider monkeys. We also have chances for coatis and agoutis. Red brocket deer is another mammal species that's possible on the tour. Northern gray fox, as well as gray four-eyed opossum. And then in terms of non-birding highlights, of course, photography is fantastic throughout, both in terms of bird, mammal, scenery, etc. We cover diverse habitats going from rainforests down in the lowlands all the way up to cloud forests and subalpine habitats right up in the highest of the altitudes. And then, of course, if you do the longer tours, there is possibility, well, we certainly do go and visit some of those ruin sites as well. So it's a destination that offers incredibly diverse highlights, even though the general wildlife extending beyond birds isn't necessarily the best. Lev, on to the next question, and that is off the top of your head, what is the highest altitude that we visit on the tour, and how long do we stay up at altitude? So, possibly in summation, is there any risk of altitude sickness in Guatemala?
Yes. So the highest altitude would be in the Cuchumatanes, which is that kind of frosty zone that I was talking about earlier. And that's about between 26 and 2,800 meters above sea level. So for me, it's just sort of the start of any potential altitude sickness. You certainly feel out of breath when you're up there, but it's not, at least in my experience leading people up there, it's not an area that's, like right away you're at Cusco, like 4,000 meters. But if you're very susceptible to altitude sickness, then yes, so that 2,800 meter in the Cuchumatanes, you might be feeling it a little bit. And we are there for just 2 days and not even 2 full days. So, yes, that if that's something that troubles you, then, and again, there we're not hiking very long distances, so you're always sort of close to the vehicle. And if you start to feel a little uncomfortable, you can always go back and relax in the car.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dev. And there was one final question here. You mentioned that winter is generally an excellent time of year to visit Guatemala. Could you maybe just elaborate a little bit on that in terms of the best time of year to visit, what some of the highlights of that time of year may be, possibly in relation to migration, and what that also means for temperatures both in the lowlands and in the highlands of Guatemala?
Right. So winter tends to be there are many times of year to visit Guatemala and have a great birding trip there. Winter tends to be the time, that sort of boreal winter, that most tours go, just because of people's availability during winter. People want to escape their northern hemisphere or northern hemisphere winter. But yes, the migration is an important aspect of that, because there are a lot of species, especially warblers, flycatchers, vireos, etc., that winter in Guatemala. And one of the sort of highlight species is golden-cheeked warbler. So this is a bird that is a breeding endemic to the Edwards Plateau in Texas. But it spends its winter in that sort of Chiapas Cordillera, and Guatemala is an excellent place to see it. Otherwise, there are 60 or 70 migratory species that you can add to your list during a winter birding session in Guatemala. So if you're coming from a non-North American country, then you'll get a whole bunch of different new birds that are wintering there that don't exist there in the summer. The temperature in the lowlands is pretty similar throughout the year. It's going to be in the high 20s, low 30s centigrade or Celsius in the middle of the day, cooler in the morning. But in the highlands, it does get below freezing relatively frequently in the Cuchumatanes, but that's only for 2 days or so. And throughout most of our highland birding, it's maybe 10, 15 degrees Celsius, maybe a little bit lower in the morning. So definitely a layers type trip. So you'd want to bring a sweater, a jacket, maybe a rainproof, because it does tend to rain here and there. It tends to be drier in the winter, which is another benefit of going during that time. But you never know, especially in this day and age, the weather is doing weird stuff. So I would always bring layers and definitely a rain gear, whether that be an umbrella or a rain jacket. And yeah, the summer is great there birding as well. It's rainier. The hummingbirds are easier to see because they're not breeding, so they're lower down. But yeah, the winter tends to be the best time for a maximum number of bird species. and just convenience.
That's absolutely brilliant, Lev. Thank you so much. I see we have one final question that's just come in from Julie. Julie asks, are there any biting insects in Guatemala? Anything along those lines to be aware of?
The answer would be yes. So, especially in the lowlands, there are some mosquitoes and biting flies. It's never like North America levels of biting insects. You know, they're not being hounded constantly by mosquitoes. And we do go during a drier time of year, so it's usually not a huge problem. And that's usually the only place where it is a problem in the lowlands. If it's a very hot day in the highlands, you might get these simulids, these like little black flies. But again, usually not something that we deal with, and something that's easily remedied with DEET, like bug spray or long pants and long sleeves. But it's not really a huge problem that we deal with on our tours to Guatemala. There's a little bit of it, especially in the lowlands, but not sort of astronomical numbers that would keep you from going outside.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lev. And with that, I think I will begin to close this webinar this evening. But
All
just
right.
before I do so, a massive thank you or to you for giving such a fantastic virtual tour of Guatemala. I'm certainly itching to jump on a plane and fly across. And just perhaps as a closing remark, just to say that all of our 2025 Guatemala tours are now fully booked. This is a destination that's incredibly high demand at the moment. It's an absolutely fantastic destination, and Lev showcased exactly why. All of our 2026 and 2027 tours are open for bookings. They are all on our website. You can make a booking directly through the website. Otherwise, you would be welcome to drop us an email either to info@rockjumper.com or simply tailormade@rockjumper.com if you prefer to travel with a private group. And we would love to host you on one of our upcoming tours. And finally, Liv, just to say we have so many comments coming through in the chat box, thanking you so much for doing such a fantastic job this evening. We really, really appreciate your time. And we really appreciate the time of all of our viewers who've taken the time out of their day to join us. So thank you all very much, and we wish you a wonderful day or evening further.
All right. Thank you very much, too, Dan. Yeah.